past semester, we've been studying how to foster an amazing business school experience. My name is Allison Smith, and this is my partner Patrick Howard, and we're going to share our findings with you today. The reason we decided to get into this was we've been surrounded by conversations like these at Leeds for 2 years now. We've had this huge goal of getting to college, and now that we're here, we don't really know what our next huge goal is. We're not able to apply our critical thinking skills to making career paths. We're having trouble feeling like our path has been prescribed to us, and we're not able to really make it for ourselves. And so our goal with this was to see, well, what's the rest of the world saying? What does the science say about this?
So after being surrounded by this environment for the prior 2 years, we decided to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the science behind why these questions might be being asked, and eventually what would a solution to them be. So to give a little background on some of the authors that we're going to be presenting on, this slide here shows, positive psychology is the field that a lot of these authors are coming from that we read about. So Seligman started things off in 2000 and is known as one of the cornerstones of modern day positive psychology. Continued through other authors like Dijk, Bronk, Lyubomirsky, and the list goes on. Seligman starts things out in 2000 in one of his papers by describing the world that we live in. And so Seligman described the world that we live in as one that's comprised of characteristics like materialism, alienation, and selfishness. The result that Seligman indicated as a result of these characteristics is a society that is engulfed in chaos and despair.
And you can actually already start to see these things taking place. According to a Gallup poll in 2013, only 30% of the U.S. workforce actually feels engaged in their work. According to the University of California, back in 1970, 11% of Americans reported feeling lonely, and now that number is up to 43%. And according to the National Institute of Mental Health, 18 million Americans suffer from depression and 40 million from anxiety.
However, the authors that we read about that stand behind positive psychology and who developed the field of positive psychology indicate that a society that well-being ultimately is the answer to the world that we live in. Well-being is the opposite of chaos and despair. And Seligman indicates that a world of well-being would be comprised of, instead of the things that we just talked about, hope, wisdom, future-mindedness, creativity, and perseverance. But that brings up the question, what exactly is well-being? Well, according to Carol D. Riff, well-being is comprised of 6 elements. So there's self-acceptance, personal growth, positive relationships, autonomy, environmental mastery, and most importantly, purpose in life. So when we looked a little bit into where would people be attaining some of these factors in their lives currently, people who do have well-being, where are they receiving a lot of these elements? And we realized that 5 of these elements are ones that are usually easier to attain in the world that we live in right now. People end up achieving usually self-acceptance, personal growth, autonomy, positive relationships, environmental mastery through a few different methods. One of those being self-help books, another being religion, and if you just do a quick Google search, there are tons and tons of exercises that you can go through to start attaining some of these things. However, the one aspect in here that there isn't a lot of well-backed, proven methods to help people find is purpose in life. So what exactly is the missing piece in well-being, purpose in life? What is purpose? Well, according to Bronk, purpose has 4 components. Goals, which in this case are self-oriented goals, goals that people set for themselves, and not goals that were set for them. There's another component, commitment, which is commitment to those goals, long or short term. It's someone's dedication to both pursue and achieve those goals in their life. There's meaning, and meaning in this sense, the best way that I would describe it is, and that Bronk would describe it as, meaning that comes out of commitment to your goals, meaning that creates value in your life, whether that's in the present moment or bigger picture. And then most notably, there's a beyond the self component to purpose. When Bronk started her research, one of the one of her goals from the beginning was to pull apart the terms meaning and purpose. In academia and in science before, up until this point, meaning and purpose had almost been used interchangeably. And so what Bronk did to separate them is added a component to purpose that wasn't in meaning. And in this case, that's beyond the self. Beyond the self is the aspect of purpose that someone feels they're serving something bigger than themselves. That's what distinguishes meaning, which is simply value to an extent, from purpose, which purpose is that value serving something beyond the self.
So then Bronk goes on to lay out a bunch of positive traits of people who have purpose in their lives. Among them are resilience, life satisfaction, they're more socially engaged, they have higher psychological well-being, and interestingly, they actually have higher physical well-being, not just in Bronk, but in a lot of the other authors that we read. Higher psychological well-being, people who are happier and have higher well-being, tend to be healthier people physically. So that's awesome, right? Except that only 25% of the population actually has purpose in their lives. So what are the rest of the 75% going through right now? Some things that we've already talked about, actually. Anxiety, boredom, loneliness, depression, things that are extremely negative. And so these are things that are already starting to occur in the US, and just like Patrick mentioned earlier, as a result of this chaos and despair climate that's been created.
So why would 75% of people be falling into this bucket? Well, according to Brian and Dici, a possible answer to this is how people are motivated in our current society. Ryan and Dici lay out a model that says that currently people's goals and commitments are being formed based off of society, family, friends, culture, external expectations of them, which then creates obligation and compliance, an obligation to comply with those expectations that have been set for them, which in turn means that a lot of the population, both in the world and in the United States and in a college setting, is actually extrinsic motivation. What Ryan and Dici then do is flip this model on its head and say that if we found a way to develop intrinsic motivation in people, we would create interest, satisfaction, and enjoyment that's genuine and not motivated by anything other than that person's internal inclinations, which then would create a culture of, instead of external motivation, it would create cognitive development, exploration, vitality, and mastery. And
Ryan and Dici are actually not the only ones to mention exploration. So Bronk points out that students who are exposed to different interests both in academia and in careers actually show more recognition of direction, of strengths, of their interests, and they're overall more prepared. And so this actually leads to a better workforce, and you can see this in the fact that happy employees are more motivated, they're more productive, and they're more engaged with their work.
So to sum up some of the research that we did and the dive into science, we live in a world that's characterized by materialism, selfishness, and alienation, which therefore creates culture and society that's engulfed in chaos and despair. What the science then tells us, though, is that to start fighting this dynamic, instead of having people who are extrinsically motivated and who end up falling into this pit of the 75% that doesn't truly have a purpose in their life, that we can start finding ways to intrinsically motivate people that therein would help them find a purpose in their life that would match what their internal inclinations and their skills are to need beyond themselves, and ultimately would create well-being or open up the opportunity for well-being in that person, and would create a world of creativity, perseverance, hope, future-mindedness, and wisdom.
So we wanted to know if all of these characteristics that we've been looking at from science and from the United States and other statistics apply to the Leeds School of Business. So we sent out a survey that got 200 responses, and the first thing we did was administer the MLQ, the Meaning in Life questionnaire that was developed by Stager. And we found that these results are almost exactly the same as what Bronk puts in her paper. 24% of Leeds students are not searching for a purpose, while 76% are. So we asked them a couple more questions about where they want to find purpose in their lives and what they want out of their college education. And so we found that nearly 80% of students want to see help, want to get help from their college education discovering their personal senses of meaning and purpose. And furthermore, 2/3 of them want the Leeds School of Business to offer more resources for it. While these are intense numbers, think about the fact that nearly 60% don't think that the Leeds School of Business is doing a good job of helping them find their personal senses of meaning and purpose in their lives. However, we wanted to fill this gap.
So, what do we know? We know that from our survey, from 200 Leeds students that responded to our survey, we know that based off of the MLQ developed by Stager, which was within the survey that we sent out, indicated that that the students here at CU are definitely searching for a purpose. We also know that the students at CU Leeds indicated that they would like for their education, for their school, to help provide them with a sense of purpose and the tools to achieve that. And we also know that they indicated that a majority of them indicated that Leeds was not currently doing this. So that brings us to the next stage in our argument. So this helped us see, this raised the question of, there's a space here that students are longing and desiring something from their education that's not currently being provided. Where is that space and how can we start to fill it? So, what do we know about Leeds? We know that Leeds already is good at helping students identify and develop interests, strengths, motivators, and development, whether that's personal or professional development. However, what's the missing piece between Leeds helping students identify this and students achieving intrinsic motivation and well-being? Well, we see the gap as being one, the robust infrastructure setup that Leeds has around helping students do these things leaves them in a place where they then know what their interests, motivators, and strengths are, but then there are no resources to help them start applying that to things that they are intrinsically motivated to do. So where did students indicate that they would like for this space, for this glue to be applied, for this extra help? Well, the 5 top responses in our survey were classes, mentoring programs, clubs, career advising, and academic advising. And again, Leeds already has a pretty robust infrastructure set up around all of these things. They all operate pretty extensively in and of themselves. However, there's no coherent and intentional and well-known plan for all of these things to start operating together in order to help students start putting all of the pieces together and combine each one of these things individually together into something that they're intrinsically motivated to do.
So this is where we saw our opportunity to come in. So we proposed that during freshman year, during the first year seminar, they would start to explore their identity. These kids have just come out of high school, they've had this long-term goal of getting to college, they've just made it. It's time to help them start thinking about it, just to trigger them, to spark them to start thinking about what are some other long-term goals I have? What do I really want to do with my life? And so they would go through an identity activity, which I'll lay out for you in just a second. And then they would debrief on that identity activity with their academic advisors and with the mentoring office. So the identity activity consists of identifying their strengths, interests, and motivators. And so they would do this by identifying first their flow states. So flow states, think of a time that you have lost track of time because you're so into what you're doing, you love it. Now start to think about the strengths that you're utilizing while you're doing those things. Maybe you chose that you really liked to do math problems and you're a good puzzle solver. You like to be analytical, right? Those are the strengths that you're utilizing. So you do that for a few different flow states. Now think of a time that you've been so bored it doesn't even seem like the clock is ticking. Think about what was going on. Think about maybe you were in a presentation and you wish that the presenter was doing something different that would pique your interest. What's that thing? What would make you interested in it? And so doing this a few times, finding your interests, finding what really sparks that in you. Now think of a time that you've been really grateful. Times that you've been surrounded by family or friends maybe. Times that you've been happy that you have your education. What are you grateful for? What are you thankful for? pulling out moments like that and saying, okay, now here are your values and your motivators. So connecting all of these and having the students kind of write a mission statement for their life. Starting out with maybe half a page to a page and then distilling it down to a sentence or two and making it their identity statement. And this is obviously not something that just gets pinned on the wall and they're like, this is me forever. No. This is about making sure that students are able to access this over and over again. They're constantly developing throughout college, and their identity should reflect that. So after they have this identity statement that shows the strengths, motivators, and interests, they would be able to enter it into a database that we would create. So the database, you would enter in the keywords like math, organization, statistics. These are all my strengths, my interests. And then I say, I'm looking for classes that I could try out. Maybe I want to use up a couple of electives here just to test the waters. It pulls up some classes along with a radar map that would show you how well that the class addresses each of your different strengths and motivators and interests. So this database is called Discovery Buffs. And what Discovery Buffs is meant to do is it's meant to help students find the softer side of things. It's supposed to take their identity statement that is a pretty soft thing. It's not like you apply that specifically. So you're taking that really soft identity statement and you're pushing it into something that's harder, something you can put on a piece of paper, something that says, I was the president of this club, I have this certificate, this minor, I chose this emphasis in business, right? I had this internship. It's all about exposing kids, like we said earlier. The more exposure they have, the happier employees they're going to be and the more productive employees they're going to be. So then they would debrief on what they have found. So Discovery Buffs is available to both the academic advisors as well as the students at any time that they would like, and the identity activity is available on Discovery Buffs so that they can continually work through that identity activity throughout their years at Leeds. So they would debrief with their academic advisors, talk about maybe a few classes that they might want to try out sophomore year, talk about a few clubs that are available at CU that they might want to try out. Maybe there's a certificate program out there that really interests them. And then they would talk to the mentoring office. Maybe Sally Forrester or Kristen Freeney can help them out with, who's a YAMS mentor that's really going to help you develop this? Who's a YAMS mentor that's really going to help you to discover more about yourself and more of your interests? So sophomore year is all about exploring those interests. So throughout the YAMS mentoring program, they're going to have that ability to talk to a real person about it. And then they're also going to use exposure and prototyping is what we're calling it. So prototyping those different soft skills. So for example, I am a marketing major, that's a hard skill, and I paired it with a sociology minor, that's a soft skill. So taking those different things and mashing them together so that you're not a one-dimensional person. You have a lot of different sides to you. So prototyping all those different sides to you, exposing and trying different things. So then they would debrief with their academic advisors, and this academic advising appointment already exists. This is the base academic advising appointment where kids are required to declare an emphasis. At this point, kids will be so much better prepared to be able to declare an emphasis, that they'll be able to go forward and know that they've already tried these things. They don't have to say, well, I was good at math in high school, so I guess finance. No, they'll actually be able to say, you know what? I loved this math class that I took. I loved this finance club that I joined. I'm doing finance. I love it. And then debriefing with the career advisors to talk about long-term careers that they could have with that, or sophomore year level internships. And again, Discovery Buffs would have internships listed on there that we would convert from Career Buffs to pull out strengths and interests that Career Buffs already identifies so that it would merge the two systems. And then again, debriefing with the mentoring office to ensure an ideal professional mentor match. So then during junior year, it's all about exploring applications. So when they're exploring applications, this is about being paired with their PMP, and then prototyping with more direction. So they're still trying out a few different things, but maybe now they've declared their minor instead of just taking a few classes in that area. Maybe now they've taken a leadership position in that club that they enjoyed so much. And so now the last step to this is meeting with the career advisors, talking about that all-important summer junior year internship and talking about long-term applications of it all. This way students have a path, and it's not prescribed to them, they're making it themselves actively throughout college. The goal is not to give them a path, the goal is to give them tools that helps them make a path.
So, to sum up the product that we just presented to you, let's look at it from a higher level point of view. we're going to be taking, starting with intrinsic motivation the freshman year, just like we talked about with the identity activity, with identifying strengths, motivators, your gratitudes, and helping students right off the bat start identifying a sense and putting the question in their mind of who am I and what constitutes who I am. And then we're moving through development well, first of all, the interface that we proposed, the Discovery Buffs, helping students develop that identity into more tangible things, in addition to the academic and career advising. Those two put together to create students who are flourishing, who have found the meeting place between the hard skills and the direction that their education helps provide and what they're intrinsically motivated to do in the world. So to take a step back with everything that we've just talked about, we know that the research that we did at CU, the survey we sent out, combined with the data that we know from multiple different sources on what the current situation in the career world is like, in addition to what the science tells us about the reasons why the world is that way, is that there's a common theme of people searching for purpose and not necessarily having the right tools or the right knowledge on how to find that. And so what our product here at Leeds is aiming to do is to help students develop a sense of identity and intrinsic motivation that therein instills in them a sense of purpose with their life that they can use to apply to their education, that then in turn creates students who have higher well-being. And when you have CU students going through the program that are graduating with higher well-being, you not only have a better reputation that's reflected on Leeds, but you have students who are going out into the world as graduates. They're doing things that they're really passionate and intrinsically motivated to do. They're therefore going to do those things better to a fuller capacity, end up being better professionals, citizens of the world, which in turn reflects back on Leeds in their program. So that's all we have for you, and can take some questions now.